Atheist Nomads, episode 251, The Trouble with God with Chris Matheson.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and in a little bit we'll be jumping into the interview. We pre-recorded this one because my niece Alicia graduated from college at the University of Idaho. And so we were busy with that. And it was really pretty awesome. The graduation was a lot better than her high school graduation. And the keynote speaker was the head of rocket science at SpaceX. So that was pretty incredible. It was definitely interesting traveling with the baby, and we had some car trouble on the way back, but I think I've got a solution for it. And if I'm right, it's going to be a pretty cheap one. But we'll be back with the regular news here next week. But for now, enjoy the interview with Chris Matheson. Joining us now is Chris Matheson. He was last on episode 115. So it's been 2.5 years. But when, famous people publish new books and ask to come back on the show, you bring them back on. Chris, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, all right, for the brief rundown for those who are under a rock and don't know who you are, you're the creator of Bill and Ted.
I am the co-creator of Bill and Ted, yes. along with Ed Solomon. Yeah.
So almost everybody, at least millennial or older, is familiar with your work.
Well, I don't know.
Those movies get played on cable television a lot.
I guess they do. I have heard that.
When there's nothing else on, you can almost...
Everybody's seen it then, It's like, well, there's nothing else on. I'll watch Bill and Ted. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and it's even in just current pop culture. The references to Bill and Ted are so common.
This is true.
Ed and I over the years have noted that phrase, so-and-so's excellent adventure, has been used to describe many pairings of people over the years. Mm-hmm. It seems to just have a kind of a ring to it.
And you get paid every time somebody does that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, God, absolutely.
That is trademarked, sir. Here's a cease and desist.
Of course we do. Yeah. No, not a penny.
Okay, you should have trademarked excellent adventure.
It would have been very smart of us to do that, yes, but we did not.
Man. Hindsight.
Yeah, really.
So when you came on last time, it was to talk about the story of God.
Right.
And you have taken that to the next level. So tell us about your new book.
The new book is called The Trouble with God. And after I finished the story of God, I just thought he was such a delightful character, As a comedy writer, my job is to find a character that I kind of hear and I think is funny, and I can write dialogue. I get the way they think, and I'm amused by it. And I thought he was a really strong comedic character because he's so strange and he's so demented and he's so foolish and he's so self-destructive and he's just such a mess. And but he's perfect. That's what makes him really funny. He is by definition perfect, but he's the most imperfect character imaginable. And so I finished and I thought, boy, I just want to keep going with this guy. This guy's really fun to write. I just kind of feel him. And
what does that say about you?
It didn't take nothing good, Obviously, it's not good, the fact that I relate to this character and he's such a mess. It's not not something to brag about. But it didn't take long to make the obvious leap and think, well, if I want to keep writing about this guy, there's more books where the same guy shows up and tells his story in a different way. Okay, I got it wrong the first time, or it didn't work out. They misunderstood me. The Jews misunderstood me. Of course they did. They're wicked Jews. The Christians misunderstood me because they're idiots, and they foolishly thought that Jesus was actually my son. Ha ha ha! That's absurd. Of course I don't have a son. I'm perfect. I need nothing like that. So then he reappears in the Quran and tries to get it right. Why he thinks it's going to go better, I don't really know. Why he thinks it's going to work the third time, and then yet again, he shows up to Joseph Smith and tells yet another version of the story. He just keeps trying, and he keeps popping up. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm just going to follow him as many times as he appears. I even continued. I didn't put these chapters in the book because they just seemed a little too esoteric. But there is a rather obscure early 1920s book called the Book of Urantia. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Book of Urantia is ostensibly the Bible written by very superior space aliens. Oh. And it's magnificently bad and stupid and boring as hell. But really, really great. I mean, almost nobody had read it, so I didn't include it. But it was great to. There he is. He's back. He pops up again in that book. And I'm sure.
It sounds like a washed-out celebrity that's just desperately trying to hit it big one more time.
Yeah, just trying to get back in the limelight one more time. I would assume that as we're speaking, people are busily writing books right now. They're trying to be prophets. They want to be prophets because being a prophet is if you can pull it off, it's a great gig.
It's a pretty good gig.
It's a pretty good gig until you get killed.
The one to keep your eyes on are the neo-Gnostics in California.
The neo-Gnostics. I'm not familiar with them. What are they up to?
They are trying to bring back
Gnosticism.
2nd, 3rd century Gnosticism. Yeah.
Really? Wow. Good luck.
That worked so well before.
I think now is the perfect time for it because California, especially if you're in the right parts of California, there's still that kind of post-hippie culture where you've got this divine spirit in you, and, well, that's Gnosticism.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Gnosticism. To the limited thing that I sort of grasp, and I could even be wrong about this, is that it's sort of mysterious and it's based on a sense of like, well, I don't really know because it's agnostic, right? Isn't that what leads to agnosticism?
No, it's the opposite. It's Gnosticism.
I do know. It's like secret knowledge.
You have secret knowledge within you.
Oh, right.
Your body is evil. Your soul is pure.
Okay.
So you can do no wrong.
Well, that's nice.
And you know everything.
Oh, well, that's cool.
And everybody else
just gotta tap into it somehow.
And everybody who doesn't know they have that secret knowledge is all wrong.
Yeah. Oh.
So you are right and everyone else is wrong. And no one can argue with you.
Well, that's always good. That's always a good, that's a winner. Mm-hmm. I'm right. Everybody else is wrong. And if you can tack on to that, and they're going to be punished, hopefully eternally for being wrong, then I think that makes it all the better.
Yeah. But the way you were describing the transition from Judaism to Christianity to Islam, that mirrors very well kind of the journey that Muhammad went through before uttering the things that would become the Quran. Atheist Nomads is proudly brought to you by listeners just like you. You can find out how you can become a patron at patreon.com/atheistnomads. That's patreon.com/atheistnomads. And I've got the baby, so hopefully she doesn't grab the mic too much.
But that's probably just part of your show at this point. You have a 5-month-old, for God's sake. Yeah.
Yeah, she likes to comment.
You got to build that in. I would think. It's funny if you're like an atheist or a non-believer, you just have the awareness that if your kids really want to rebel and get to you at some point, you just know they're going to turn to religion. That's what they're going to do.
It happened in my family. My brother came home and asked if he could go to church camp. we were all raised atheist. So my dad blew up. He threatened to kick him out of the house. If you bring that Jesus stuff in here. And what we found out later, what I found out later was that church camp was where everybody went to do drugs.
Oh, all right. Your brother had a plan.
So he had a plan. He wanted, but he had no way of asking, hey, can I go camping for the weekend without it coming up that it was actually a youth group, church group that he was going to go camping with. And,
he wanted to get high.
He was just, that's where all the shrooms, acid, ecstasy, all of that was just being done up at church camp. And,
I'm sure your dad was relieved.
He was. He would much rather.
It's just shrooms. It's not Jesus.
No, those are those are pretty harmless.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
not like religion. But that was I mean, my brother could have come home and said he was gay, and my dad probably wouldn't have blinked an eye. But come home and say that he wanted to go to church, and that was the closest my dad ever came to kicking one of the kids out.
Our kids are grown now. Our kids are 27 and 24, so we're kind of, I hope, past that. But we had an awareness when, and they both went through sort of rebellious stages when they were teenagers. And both my wife and I were like, you know what? If they really want to burn us, they really want to get us, they're going to want to start going to church. But thankfully, it didn't happen. Yeah,
no, I was raised Unitarian, so we went to the Unitarian church every Sunday. Gave my dad a couple hours away from the kids. He stayed home and just did whatever dads do. And then we were raised learning about all different kinds of religion. Yeah. And we all turned out just fine. It was great. So I kind of have that plan for Kylie once she's able to not cry.
What it looks like, I think, from an atheist standpoint, is if you don't indoctrinate them young and you don't really. By the way, is cursing allowed on your show? Because sometimes it is. Yes, okay. And if you don't fuck them up too bad, then the odds of them wanting to needing the invisible man in the sky to love them and believing that that's true, even if they needed it, actually being able to make that leap, that's right, I'm going to build my life around that. I think those are pretty low odds.
I think it takes some kind of trauma for that to happen. Yeah,
I would agree.
Or a boy.
Or what?
Or a boy or girl. With my niece.
That's true. You can convert to a date.
She was raised atheist. Pretty much the only time she ever went to church was with me. And then I left the church and she joined the church. And it was for a boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
And they broke up and she left.
And because she didn't really believe it. She was just doing it for the boy. Yeah. Are we rolling again?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
Oh, all right. We're back in.
Okay, so Muhammad, the way you described it is basically what he did. He studied with the Jews and thought they were dirty thieves, and he studied with the Christians and thought they were polytheists and just weird and stupid, and started his own thing.
Yeah.
Can't really blame him when you put it in that frame of reference.
No, the only thing that really is there to criticize is I don't know why you think it's going to go any better this time. It's kind of quite an active ego to think it's going to be dramatically different this time. I guess, those wicked, evil Jews got it wrong, and those Christians are dummies. But I'm going to get it right. And then he has the unbelievable hubris, staggering hubris, to go back and retell their stories and change them in dramatic ways, which is jaw-droppingly great.
That is what you find in religious, actually, in any kind of leader, is this feeling of self-importance that they are destined to do something great, that they're not going to mess it up. Everybody else is messing it up.
Right.
And then you get a religion.
It's a very unusual personality type. I mean, in the history of the world, there's just not many of these people. They're all men, as far as I know. I'm not aware of a woman who's ever really even tried to make this move. It seems to be a male thing. I'm going to just dictate reality. I'm going to just describe what reality is in a very large kind of way.
I think
almost everybody fails, and a few pull it off. Amazingly, they kind of pull it off.
I think the closest for a woman doing it was Mary Baker Eddy.
Yeah, Mary Baker Eddy would be the closest, right? Yeah, and she's an important figure, but I don't think she ranks with Muhammad or
not even close,
or Solomon or Paul or something like that.
Because even with the Adventists and Ellen White, she was controlled by James White, and then controlled by other men in the church. And when they couldn't control her, they exiled her.
Yeah, not surprising, I guess.
Yeah. Powerful men don't like women messing things up for them.
No, not at all. It's hilarious. The misogyny of all of these books is astounding, and once you click into it, I mean, the raw distaste for women in the Old Testament is just so overt, like they're unclean and they bleed and they're gross, and the whole thing's just for
I deny none of that.
What's that?
I deny none of that.
Yeah, it's just all true, right?
Yeah.
Nailed it. And then you get to the New Testament, and it's not quite. Jesus doesn't seem to be. He's not a misogynist in the same way. So maybe the New Testament's not quite as misogynist.
Old Testament women need to go hide in a tent a quarter of the time. New Testament, they just need to shut up.
Yeah, they just need to be quiet. Yeah, I mean, Paul is basically like they have to be quiet. They're not serious. They don't count. They're not legit. They can't possibly have a serious thought in their head. Again, nailed it.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad you're so open to
have low expectations. Then you're always pleasantly surprised.
And then in the Quran, women basically seem to essentially function as like they're eternal sex slaves for the men in paradise. No, they're not even baby makers. They're just for pleasure, because they're not going to have babies in paradise. Oh,
that's true. That's true. You don't need babies.
No, why would you need babies? It's paradise.
They're gross.
They just wreck it. Yeah, but then the Book of Mormon is kind of the climax, because there's like no women. There's just no women in the Book of Mormon. It's just a man's story. There's like no women speak. Pretty much in the entire book, which is just beautiful.
They have their place.
Yeah,
but they don't get the benefit of having a voice at all.
None. So I think that would be God's favorite book in that respect. Like, all right, good, finally. They're not even in the story.
I was telling Dustin I was admiring the titles of your books, because it reminded me of the joke in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the philosopher that wrote all of his books, where God went wrong. What's with this? Who is this God person anyway? I just thought I liked the titles of your book. I think you need to keep going along that line.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I think that's what it warrants.
Because there is always so much more material there.
It's very rich. It's a very rich vein for comedy, because here you have this story that is presented as absolute truth, capital A, capital T. This is the absolute truth. This is reality completely. And if you don't agree with it, you will be punished eternally. And so that's
I wish we could do that to flat earthers.
Yeah. And then it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous story. He's a ridiculous character. It's great
very
stuff.
Life of Brian.
Yeah. That's another. I mean, well, these are all they're kind of the definitive satires of this stuff, really.
Outside of religion, nobody looks to thousands of years ago for information about how to live life.
Yeah, that's one of the jokes of the whole thing, right? Like, somehow our understanding of our place in the universe has changed dramatically in the last 3,000 years, and we don't have the same ideas about most things.
Society's kind of grown up.
Yeah, society's kind of grown up. But somehow, amazingly, it was all just spelled out to a T 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago or whatever, and was absolutely correct, and we're supposed to live by it now. It is a strange way of looking at things.
It does show up in other cultures. The Chinese are particularly famous for their the golden age that they're always trying to throw themselves back to, and there was this time of perfection, and you have to go back to that. But modern, it's just like this. If you were to look back at what it was like during the Golden Age, or supposedly what it was like during the Golden Age, women didn't have a place. Kids were basically labor.
That's why it was golden, apparently.
Right. So it's like, yeah, is that golden, though?
Yeah.
Not really.
No, there is no golden age in the history of the world.
No,
people like to drift towards
it's just
that
survival
idea.
For the most part.
But where does it happen? And if it does happen, it's always so fleeting. It lasts for like 20 years or something, and then it's gone.
Yeah, who knows?
People.
Who knows how many utopias have crumbled over the centuries?
Well, and in every single one of those utopias, the utopia was for a few hundred, maybe a few thousand rich people.
Yeah, not everyone was involved.
And almost everybody else was a slave.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I was reading about
who is John Galt?
Athens under Pericles, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And that's kind of one of those golden age moments, right? All these brilliant thinkers and brilliant poets and brilliant philosophers and a kind of a close to a sort of a philosopher king sort of person. Well, okay, it lasts for about 30 years. He's driven out. Pericles is driven out by his enemies. He's driven out of power, even though he's kind of supposed to be a very great ruler.
Well, that didn't end well.
And as you say, what's it all built on? It's all built on slaves. The whole thing's built on slaves anyway. So that's a golden age.
Yeah. Yep.
Good times. Good times.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if we had the history of right now written by the 1%, it would be a golden age.
It's a golden age for some people. Yeah.
That's true. The difference is just their slaves are getting paid a little bit.
Yeah.
Still building those great monuments for the rich, though. And
Yeah. Very true.
All right. So you just covered the Quran and Book of Mormon, right? Or did you get any other texts in there?
I also just wanted to include something modern. So I pulled in Scientology because I thought it would be very amusing to have God. I kind of have the God character reach a dead end with mankind. Why is this not working? Why can I not seem to win them over? Why do they all disagree? Why do they not love me the way that I want them to love me? And then have L. Ron Hubbard show up to kind of answer his questions. L. Ron Hubbard nails it, he thinks, in Dianetics, which is a truly insane book. If you've never read it, it's absolutely wonderful. It's mad. He's a lunatic. His take on existence is just so kind of
sci-fi.
Yeah, well, it has some of that, but it's really dark and really kind of self-hating and really ugly. It's really an ugly view of things. But then you can be perfect. You can be a clearer if you just do certain. You get hypnotized essentially and go back to the womb where all your problems stem from, because in the womb when your parents have sex, you get traumatized forever because your dad's penis is hitting you again and again, and that's going to destroy your life. That is kind of L. Ron Hubbard's take.
Oh my God, I love it.
Or your mom has to take a shit, and your mom's sitting on the toilet saying, pushing and straining and talking to herself, and that's going to destroy your life. That gets in your head. That's where you get engrams.
Oh my gosh.
Engrams stem from those exact moments, and they haunt you forever. But you can get rid of them through Dianetics, and then you go clear. And once you go clear, you're perfect. You're basically perfect. Your IQ shoots up by like 50 points. You never ever get sick again. All of your perversions and degeneracy goes away, and you're kind of a perfect being. So I thought it would just be funny that, first of all, it would explain why humans are so fucking horrible to God, because he doesn't understand why are they so horrible, even though he made them. But then that God would get very excited about the idea of being a clear, that God gets really, I have my God character, get really, really happy about the idea that he's a clear. But then eventually he turns on that prophet too and gets mad and basically decides to end the world. And then I go back to Revelations, because Revelations is just such a fantastic climax. It's such a wonderful climax. It's so brutal and so ugly. It's beautiful. Yeah. He's such a supervillain. He's the most awful supervillain of all time. All he wants to do is not just kill pretty much everybody on Earth, but torture them to death. I mean, it's just the most awful. And then have them
worship him for it.
Yeah, right.
Love me. Why won't you just love me?
Yeah, why won't you just love me? That seems to be the implicit question at the center of all of these books. Why don't you love me? It's sad in a way. I mean, it made him an interesting character for me because it humanized him in a way, and there is this kind of pathetic. There is a pathos to this character. And I liked that too. I found that more interesting to write.
No, that's way more fun to write and read. It almost sounds like it would make a good graphic novel. Following God on all of his, like, what? Come on, guys.
Yeah, I probably would.
And with Revelation, it's out of all of them, it's the text that was most clearly written by a severely mentally disturbed person.
Yeah. There's quite a few of those in my view. I mean, Ezekiel is insane, and there's some of the other minor prophets who feel pretty loony. But yes, I would agree with you. Revelations is the one that just jumps out at you like, wow. Man, oh man, you would be in a mental hospital these days. This dude should be in a straitjacket. And he's written, the ending. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about it, is that like we're given the end to the story. They tell you everything that's going to happen, including what's going to happen in the future, how this story is going to end. And it's the end. You couldn't wish for a better ending. It's just so brutal and so ugly and so colossally mean-spirited and so stupid and so puny.
It sounds like
laughable,
like an 80s dystopian future.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Revelation, John it's the least literally written of the texts in the New Testament.
It's very badly written. Yes, it is very, very poorly written.
It's so poorly written that you can translate almost everything 5 or 10 different ways because half of the grammar is gone.
The original Vague book.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. The declensions are missing from a lot of the nouns. A lot of them have what obviously is the wrong declensions, the endings that give the words their meaning in the sentence.
So it's like somebody copied down the mad scratchings of somebody in a prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
darkness, evil.
I didn't realize that the translations were that flawed and that problematic. That's interesting.
You have to take liberties to translate that one in a coherent way because it's hard to make sense of it.
I think there's even like at least one acknowledgement of it inside the text where the narrator, whoever the narrator, says it takes wisdom and insight to understand what I'm saying here. They like, right, yeah, well, that's one way of putting it, you know.
No, you're
like,
crazy.
There's one of my favorite things. To me, like coming from a movie background, I'm sure you've heard the term "there's a reel missing." You know what that means?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's a reel missing because we are building towards the climactic battle. The whole damn thing is building to the climactic fight between the Antichrist and, well, ideally God, right? I mean, it should be God, shouldn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, you'd think it should be God versus Satan, God versus the Antichrist, at the very least, a gigantic, humongous, like end of Star Wars sort of battle between the Antichrist and Jesus. And we just don't really get it. It's just sort of like, it just kind of passes by. And then you're like, wait, what? Did it happen? It's just like, wait, somebody sprinkled something out of the sky and just kind of put them to sleep or something. It's really very, very anticlimactic stuff, considering that on some level you could say the whole book's been building to it. It's very bad storytelling.
Well, and even if you look at it from the standpoint of you're giving away the ending of the story to the people who are going to be doing this, why would you put in the effort of assembling a massive army against God if you know that you're not even going to get a fight?
Yeah, that's right. What is the point? I would say that one of the Book of Mormon is an absolutely dreadful book. Absolutely dreadful. I mean, Joseph Smith is a
great Broadway, terrible book.
Yeah, good on Broadway. He's a very, very, very clumsy, heavy-handed, self-conscious writer who just doesn't have any talent as a storyteller, as a character writer, as for description, for anything. But he has a natural genius for certain things, and he gives us a gigantic money shot that I think all believers hunger for, and that is Jesus returning. You know, that moment, he writes it. I mean, that is the moment in the Book of Mormon. Jesus appearing in the sky, and he's pissed. And he's like, I'm going to get you now. It's payback time. And he does, you know, he blows up cities and he drowns people. He does Judgment Day kind of stuff. And it's really staggering. It's like, wow, okay. I guess I could see how this could be very powerful to read if you were of a certain mindset. I mean, to me, it's, you know, obviously it's the whole thing's ludicrous, but it's a clever move to make, that one.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
As portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, it's totally that. Or it's, you know, it's the Mel Gibson thing. It's like Mel Gibson would have loved that sequence. Like, he's back, man, and he is a badass, and he is back for vengeance, and he takes it, and he kills a shitload of people. And he's really fierce. And then he travels down to Earth and he says a few things and, you know, dances around a little bit with, you know, has children sit in the middle of a fire and dances around them. And then that's it. And then leaves.
Oh, wow. That's just bizarre.
Have you guys read Book of Mormon?
No.
Well, it's hard to recommend exactly.
Yeah, is there a Cliff Notes version?
I will say, if you can get inside it, it is kind of a fascination. If you can get inside the Joseph Smith mindset, what he's doing, it's really kind of fascinating. And almost like a weird psychodrama, like he can't help it. He has all of these antichrists show. He has a number of antichrists, like a bunch, and they're all just humans, and they all only do one thing. They attack his ideas. So he has these critics of him, not him personally, but of his book, essentially his narrative, his story, show up and denounce his book on a number of occasions in very fierce terms. That's pretty interesting, actually.
Psychologically profiling this guy through his writing is fascinating.
Oh, totally. That is one of the great fascinations of these books, because ostensibly they're written by God, and these guys try to hide themselves. They try to hide their own agendas because they that's the pose, right? I have nothing to do with this. This is not about me. I have no ego. This is not about. I'm a messenger here. I'm just trying to get out of the way. But of course, that's absolute horseshit. It's all about them. It's all about their ego. It's all self-serving. And when you look at it that way, then things look different, and it can get kind of interesting.
Yeah. No, I've the worst religious text I've read was the Quran.
It's hard. It's not a juicy, lively read like the Old Testament is.
Well, what was that podcast that we were listening to where they read through the Quran?
Yeah.
Are you thinking of Chronify Me or when Scathing Atheist was...
I think it was Scathing Atheist did it.
They were reading through it and talking about it.
Yeah, and there were some parts where they're like, and he repeats himself, and he repeats himself, and he repeats himself. Oh, here's something new. It's like, oof, this is a rough book to read. A
lot of the Quran amounts to believe or suffer. There's a lot of it. I'm pretty sure that Islam means submit. And that is apt. I mean, that's right. That is the nature of that one. Submit. Bow down before this thing. And if you don't, I mean, the level of threats in that book is wild. I mean, it is one dark, horrible threat after page after page after page after page.
That's what the book is really all about. It's just new and interesting ways to torture people.
It's a lot of threats, and they are, but to me, it's like, well, believe in Muhammad, or pay the price.
Yeah, and the copy I read was the Essential Quran, so the editors of that one did their best to minimize the redundancy as much as possible.
Right.
And it was still the most repetitive thing I've ever read.
Still, you can put lipstick on a pig.
The list of the prophets that gets repeated over and over and over and over again, and it's the same list every time.
Yeah, it's not a narrative. I mean, the Old Testament is a big, big narrative. I mean, it's a sprawling, mini series that covers thousands of years and very alive with characters. And the New Testament is like a novella or a short story. It's a very small. It's 30 years basically, and mainly 1 year. And told from 4 different standpoints, but it's a narrative. It's very much a narrative. The Quran is not, and the Book of Mormon is another huge sprawling narrative. It's awful and horribly told, but it is a narrative. The Quran is not a narrative. It's a lot of a lot of scolding and a lot of admonishing. And the only narrative stuff is when he retells the Bible stories and his big edition of Paradise. That there's narrative there, but otherwise, no.
Yeah. And the number of times that he rails on how Jesus was just a man, a very good, holy man, but just a man.
Yeah. Well, that's the point of the book. I mean, really, that's the big move, right? That's what the Christians got wrong. Of course, Jesus is not God's son. But then the hilarious thing is that his description of Jesus as a baby completely undermines this version of things where Jesus is just a normal man. Because as soon as Jesus is born, he basically makes a giant speech to a crowd where he prophesies his own death and his own resurrection, which is very strange for a just normal human baby to do.
Yeah. Maybe you could get some wise woman to read drool markings as prophecy.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. And the way that the Quran was actually written wasn't even just somebody writing a book. It was somebody generations later writing down the oral tradition over and over and over again.
Is that to say that Muhammad that nothing was written down in his lifetime? Is it more or less like,
yeah,
it's like the New Testament then?
Yeah, they're proud of the fact that nothing was written down by Muhammad, that the oral tradition is more accurate.
No.
And who actually finally wrote it down then?
It was
some crazy dudes.
Muhammad's, let's see, I think the successor of his successor was the one who sent out a bunch of scribes to record the words of the prophet.
Of the prophet. That's interesting. I did not know that. Oh.
Which is why it is being so repetitive. Is people had the same recollections of the tellings and retellings of things he said every time you wrote it down. And if it's a little bit different, well, that's a different text.
It's all
part
in
of the text. Yeah.
Huh. Well, that is interesting. I did not know that.
The more you know. Ding.
Yeah.
Where at least the new or the Bible has writers, and the Book of Mormon had writers. Well, the Book of Mormon had a writer.
Yeah, it's one of the great jokes of the Book of Mormon that supposedly, because he's so trying to mimic the Bible, he's very, very consciously trying to, even writing in that style, thee and thou, and he's writing King James Bible style, basically, and he has a bunch of different characters talking, just like, or a bunch of different storytellers, like in the Old Testament. But he's such a bad writer that he can only write in one voice, and it's always his. So they all sound like the same one bad writer, basically. None of them has any personality at all. Like when you read the Old Testament in particular, you do feel those different. You feel you're in the presence of different people at different times. And when you read the four Gospels, you are getting definitely very distinct hits off these people, but the Book of Mormon is it's just him, but trying to pass himself off as like a dozen different people. It's very funny.
Yeah, that is. I want to revisit L. Ron Hubbard again. Since you've got a background in Hollywood, have you watched Battlefield Earth?
No, I never have. No. Have you?
We did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we just watched it. It was on Netflix, and I couldn't pass it up.
I assume it's monumentally horrible.
Oh my God!
I want those 2 hours back.
Yeah, I would think
it was okay for bad '90s sci-fi.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was worse than those.
John Travolta is terrible.
Yeah.
So you take a plot that is weak to start with, add characters that are weak, a weak premise, and a low budget.
Right.
And you get a really, really crappy movie.
Yeah, that is a recipe. That is a very, very good recipe for a very bad movie.
But one of the problems even came up in it is the timeline that's happening. You've got events that are happening at the same time transpiring along, where one timeline obviously can't be more than a few days or weeks, and the other ones would require years, but then they come back together, and you have cavemen flying Harriers.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Harriers.
Well, comedically speaking, that's pretty good. That's what you just described as very good fish out of water comedy. If it was meant comedically. Cavemen flying Harriers is pretty fucking funny, potentially, but
yeah, but the skill they had and going up against skilled alien fighter pilots and the fact that these planes had been sitting for 1,000 years and are still working.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I've never read any of Hubbard's fiction. I don't think he's taken very seriously by anyone. I don't think anybody puts him in the same category as like whatever Ray Bradbury or Isaac Asimov or something like that. I think he's kind of looked at as a joke, even in that genre.
Unless it's a Scientologist you're talking to.
Unless it's a Scientologist you're talking to, in which case he's presumably Shakespeare and Tolstoy combined.
So John Travolta had to make that movie because he had to do a wonderful job of getting the most amazing story ever told into a movie.
Yeah, I guess so. I presumably that's true.
Oh, it's epically bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend Dianetics to anyone. I truly would. I would. Again, you have to get into the L. Ron Hubbard mindset, but
I would love to listen to an audiobook version.
Oh, I'm sure you
like
could.
Voiced by somebody like Morgan Freeman or something.
I'm sure there's a number of audio versions of it, and it is really, really, it's really demented. His view of things. He's really mentally ill, this guy, in a way that maybe you have to be to pull this giant move off. You almost have to be kind of demented. You have to be kind of crazy. If you have your feet on the ground, if you live in reality, I don't know if you can make these crazy moves. I don't know if you can make these giant leaps, because you wouldn't even think of it. You wouldn't want to, and you'd never imagine that you could. You have to be kind of crazy, I think, to do this thing. But he's crazy.
You can say that about any religious leader.
I believe so, yes. I believe that is true.
So does the Dianetics get into the spaceships that look like DC-10s?
No, it does not.
It's just the psychology.
Dianetics is not. It's a diagnosis of what is wrong with mankind and how to fix it. Okay, that's what it's about. It is L. Ron Hubbard being a doctor and laying everything out. It is pre-Scientology. It is such a massive success, and he becomes so famous and so wealthy that he then uses it as a launching point to create Scientology. But it remains essential to Scientology, because that idea of engrams and why one would become a Scientologist, to deal with one's pain. That's all in Dianetics.
Okay. And did you know that engrams show up in Star Trek?
Engrams are in Star Trek? How is that? In what way?
Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. Anytime they're dealing with any kind of memory wiping technology, they have to go in and try to retrieve the engrams. Really? Yeah. Wow.
I think that was purely coincidence.
Do you?
I don't know. It has to be. It has to be. My mind can't wrap around the idea of...
I don't know. I mean, I know Scientologists were pretty common in Hollywood for years. I don't know if they still are. I think it's shrunk back. But yeah, you just never know. Some pretty major people were Scientologists, and maybe they worked on Star Trek. I don't know.
Well, and all it takes is having one writer have the answer for how to advance that part of the story, and then it continues on through the franchise.
That's true.
The only weird, I mean, engrams are bad. Like, engrams are really bad. Engrams are things you don't want. You definitely want to be rid of them. So
right. So it's like they use the same word, but they're not for the same thing.
They don't mean it the same way. Yeah.
They just mean it as the unit of memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But it is kind of funny if you think tongue-in-cheek some writer threw that in there just to...
Well, there's that possibility too. Yeah, somebody satirizing it a little bit too. I mean, that could also be. People are sly.
Yeah. Oh man. Have you started working on the next book?
I have, actually. I want to kind of give the same treatment to Buddhism.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Because I think Buddhism has gotten quite a free pass for a very long time, and somehow has the reputation for being the cool religion, for being kind of like so much better. I don't agree. I think it's every bit as fatuous and ugly and stupid and mean-spirited as the others. And
yeah, absolutely.
He's a ridiculous...
It's not all Zen Buddhism with yoga and prayer, meditation and stuff. There's a lot of people who suffer at the hands of...
Well, there is that. Yeah, there is that. But I want to go all the way back to the guy himself. I think he's a foolish, fraudulent character, and I want to kind of just deconstruct it.
Oh, it's so
honestly, I don't even. Well, it's rooted in that.
Yeah.
Right? Like only think of yourself. I mean, that idea of navel gazing. Well, it does come from that.
Yeah, give up all your possessions and demand that people feed you.
Yeah, right. It's pretty great, isn't it? Yeah, one of the
sounds like socialism.
The eightfold path is right livelihood. What is right livelihood? For them, apparently, right livelihood is just wander around with a bowl and ask people to feed you. That's right livelihood. Yeah. To me, he's like what distills the gist of this guy, the fraudulence of this character, is that he spends a lot of time talking about how ego is the enemy. Ego is something we have to be rid of. Ego is all wrong. And then he had his followers call him Perfect One. That's what he's called, Perfect One. Ego is meaningless, but call me Perfect One. It's like, well, there you go. You're a complete fake.
Yes, This sounds awesome, and I'm excited to read it.
Oh, good. Oh, it's fun to write. I mean, to me, there is no real... I don't like it. Obviously, I'm not a fan of religion. I think that's rather evident. I don't like any of them, and I would say at this point, Islam is definitely the scariest and the creepiest. But I would say if one of them really deserves a fucking cream pie in the face, it's Buddhism. It's like, you people need to get knocked down a few pegs, because this smug kind of self-satisfied, we're just all about love and compassion. It's like, give me a break. I don't buy it for a second.
Good for you. Good for you.
Well, considering the fact there are Buddhist theocracies and persecution in the name of Buddhism right now.
Well, that too, sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's basically what happened to the Rohingya, right?
Yes. One of the worst genocides right now is in the name of Buddhism.
They love to talk about how compassionate they are, but if you their versions of hell are so brutal. So horrible. They're just ghastly. They're absolutely ghastly. They're very creative. They're much worse than just, you get roasted by fire, right? Which is kind of the Christian-y hell, right? You burn. Oh no, they're just they're torture chambers. They go on for billions of years. And they've got a variety of them. And I personally think the idea of karma is grotesque. I think it's ugly, and I think it's mean-spirited, because you look at somebody whose life... if you're coming from the vantage point of being relatively privileged, and most religious, quote, many religious seekers and ascetics have been that, and you're looking at somebody who's got a horrible, brutal life. They're not choosing to just walk away from their palace and be a beggar. They're actually just have a horrible, brutal life. And you say, well, the karma is you deserve that. You deserve that. Whatever you have, you deserve. Not only is your life shitty, but you deserve that shitty life because you were bad in your past life. Now, my life is good. And not only is my life good, but I deserve it because I was good in my past life. My attitude to that is just fuck you. Fuck you people. That is mean. That is mean, and it's ugly. And it's brutal.
I always have to laugh because I have a relatively good life. I have a healthy baby. I have a nice nice home with a husband, and things are going great, and I'm an atheist, so it's just like a big F you to all of that.
Well, yeah. Right.
I don't have to beg or grovel or do nice deeds or do anything like that. I do nice deeds because I think it's nice. But I'm not going to get any of it back. That's...
yeah,
I don't feel entitled.
Atheists are not working for a reward in another life in the same way that believers are. We don't believe that. I always said the imbalance in how we view each other is always really striking to me. I look at a believer, a Christian, a Muslim, whatever, and I think, well, nothing different is going to happen after death to them than to me. We're just going to die. That's it. The same thing's going to happen to all of us. Well, they don't. They look at me and they think I'm going to roast for all eternity, while they're going to be rewarded. And one of their rewards, I guess, will be looking down and chuckling at my eternal punishment. It's such an imbalance. It's so repugnant, I think.
Yeah. Well, and with karma, one area I find it troubling is there's no reason to act. You see injustice happening. You don't need to do anything because they'll get it. They'll get theirs in the end. Right.
Yes, it is definitely a recipe for kind of complacency.
Yeah.
And what would be the point of trying to change anything anyway? Because you can't change anything. Yeah, I think I don't care for that aspect of it either.
You know, and if you look around the world, there aren't really any good examples of good functioning Buddhist majority democracies.
Yeah,
Japan would be
the ones that are all atheists.
Yeah, they've moved past the Buddhism.
Yeah, I don't know to what degree is Japan. I honestly don't know this. I mean, does Japan think of itself as a Buddhist nation the way we think of ourselves as a, quote, Christian nation?
Yes, but they also all realize that everybody's basically atheist. What they're doing is they are carrying on traditions for the tradition's sake. Very few people. Yeah, if you do want to become like an actual priest or something, you're free to do it. But those people are that's not the normal Japanese person. You're looking at something. Yeah, I forget how much, but it was somewhere like above 75% of the population is atheist.
Wow. I mean, Buddhism also does evolve as it moves north. It starts off very kind of stern and, all life is only pain and the only goal is, it's so nihilistic. Life is pain. Life is pain. Life is suffering, and the only thing to strive for is extinction. It's like, oh, that's great. Boy, that's beautiful. Sign me up for that. But it does, as it moves north into like China in particular, it does change, and it becomes much more, I guess, positive. And it's sort of like, no, you go to heaven. All you have to do as you're on your deathbed is just talk to the Buddha and say his name 3 times and you'll go to heaven forever. So it's a whole different thing by the time it travels north. Yeah. It's kind of silly and childish, but it's less mean-spirited, I guess.
Well, I think maybe part of it was as it was moving north, especially into China, it became a tool of the state.
Right.
And you don't want the tool of the state to be nihilistic.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah. Huh. Are you going to ever take on Hinduism?
I did. I asked myself that exact question because I'm pretty far into the Buddhist book, and I was like, "Well, damn, man, maybe you ought to just finish it off, right?" And so I got a few books. I got a few books on Hinduism, and I read them, and I finished, and I thought, I don't know, man. It just doesn't offend me the same way for a few reasons. It's polytheistic, and that never seems as horrible to me because, there's a bunch of different gods, and people kind of worship different gods, or they favor different gods. There's not as much of like, in at least what I read, there's not as much of like the priestly class. People kind of do it more in their own homes, their own way. It's not as misogynistic. There's much more of a tradition of goddesses, a lot of goddesses, a lot of femininity built into it. The caste system is a really gross, ugly thing. But no, I mean, my first take on reading these, because I didn't know, and I still don't. I mean, I read these quickly and rather superficially, but my takeaway was like, well, I just don't see it. It doesn't offend me. It's just like, I don't see an opening.
I think it's
at this point, I would say no.
You just have just have to find it.
I've got your opening for it. God is getting tired of being called a misogynist.
Yeah.
So he takes the form of a Hindu goddess.
Right. But how's that making fun of Hinduism? Oh. How's that going after Hinduism?
Yeah,
you would have to do it kind of like I think from the Buddha's point of view, where you follow Krishna, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there about Hinduism, and I think that you could, if you put a little bit of work into it, but I wouldn't blame you for not wanting to.
I mean, like, I don't love the Bhagavad Gita. It's not like a essential text for me, because no religious text is essential for me. I think it's kind of beautiful in a way. I think it's as good as any religious text I've ever read. I don't know whether I fundamentally agree with it, but I don't think that matters. I don't think it's ugly, and I don't think it's stupid. And usually I think the things that make me want to go, that really get me motivated, is like, I think this is ugly, and I think this is stupid, and I think this is really pretentious, and people think it's a lot more than it is, and I'm going to just gut it if I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of, that's
what you know.
Yeah.
That's what gets me going. And so far I don't see that in Hinduism, but you never know. You never know.
All right. We are running out of time. Where can people find The Trouble with God?
Amazon, I would say, it's going to be in bookstores here and there, but I can't say exactly which ones. I would say you want to buy it and go on Amazon.
All right. And where can people follow you?
I kind of nowhere. I just don't do it. I don't do any. I don't do any of that. I'm just like a 19th century man, I think.
Okay. So read your books.
Yeah, read the books, right. If you're interested in if for some crazy reason you're interested in following me, and honestly, I don't know why you would be, but if for some crazy reason you are, then periodically I'm going to put out a book, and you can follow me that way.
I love it.
Awesome.
I feel like that's really going to catch on.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to catch on in a huge way.
Oh, man.
We're oversaturated with social media. It's time to just burn it to the ground and start over.
I just find myself looking at it for the most part and thinking, oh, God, I don't know. I'm glad it exists, because there's people who I want to keep an eye on, and it allows me to keep an eye on them. And also...
you did mention adult children, right?
I mentioned what?
Adult children.
Oh, yeah. No, not my own kids. No, not my own kids. Other people. I don't actually watch my own kids very much. And I don't think they're very active on social media anyway. And if they are, I don't think it's on Facebook, which is the only one that I would have any access to. Because my daughter kindly allows me to, stalk people on Facebook, even though I'm not on Facebook. She gave me her information, which was very sweet of her. So now I can stalk people, which I do. That I do. But I don't want anybody stalking me, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's sick. Who would do
private.
That?
I want to be private.
Oh, man, that is awesome.
I don't know. It's me. I don't know if it's awesome, but it's me.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure having you on again.
It was fun talking to you guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.